Hello and welcome, everybody. I am the Restless Kaiser, and I'm here with Mike. We should have asked this before the show. Is it Tuñez? Tuñez?
It's Tuñez. You could pronounce it however you want.
Tuñez. Okay. Yeah. How did I do? Tuñez?
They're good. Yeah, it's like Muñez, but with a T instead of
okay.
an N. So.
From Firelock Games. We're going to talk a little bit about the Firelock's family of games, the kind of stable, because you've got a lot of product now.
Yeah, we do.
And then we're going to drill down a little bit more deeply into the new Port Royal Kickstarter, which I'm really excited about. So I'm not going to try and do any hobbying today because I think we're in a bit more of an interview situation. But for those that want to know, I am still working on the 15mm Clash of Steel British tanks. They will get done one day. Who knows? So, like Firelock Games, then. There's a lot of product there. There's a strong theme around the kind of 17th and 18th century in the Caribbean, but you have others, like you've got a First World War game and so forth. Tell me a little bit about how do you pick what you're going to do next?
Well, it's pretty much just what we want to do, whatever we're interested in, or typically the games based on, because most of the games are based on Blood and Plunder and the mechanics of that game, and they're just kind of like getting those because people really like the mechanics of Blood and Plunder, so they'll get the mechanics of that game and they'll like transpose it into something else, and they'll tweak it and modify it, add a little bit of their own flavor to it, and obviously make changes that are appropriate. As you can probably imagine, the jump between 17th and 18th century colonial conflict and the First World War is pretty significant. So, certain things are still true. Like nobody likes getting shot at, for example. So those types of things still hold their weight. But there are some mechanical changes to illustrate the differences too. But typically somebody will come to us, and definitely I'm thinking about it. All so far of the games we've published, there's a local HMGS con in Orlando called Huracan and Recon. HMGS South, basically they run two different cons, and that's kind of like our Florida historicals community. And everyone, so different people there have kind of approached me. So it started with Rufus and Kai, who were kind of like, they were pretty fundamental to Blood and Plunder as on its first expansion. They did the World War I game. Eric Hansen, who did Blood and Crowns most recently, and then Damien Macomber and Edgar Baon, who are the ones who did Blood and Steel, which is a Victorian Age game. They all come from that same convention. So people will just pitch us games there, and if we think it sounds good and looks interesting, we'll publish it.
Okay. And the other thing I'd wondered about, because a few people are very precious about their games and their setting, and I've seen you on YouTube videos here and there. Like you're quite motivated by the history, like the real history of this kind of Port Royal. So, because there are a million video games and novelizations, and it's all like and all that kind of thing. And the reality is that these exciting episodes in history are a span of period of 200 years, right? They didn't all happen every week. How purist and how important is it that your game is authentic as opposed to adventurous? I mean, there's no sea monster models for Oak and Iron, for example.
Right. I'm not super purist, believe it or not. I guess I sort of am, not so much in a historical sense, but just in more of a vision for an individual game kind of sense, right? For example, Blood and Plunder, there's just so much. When we were working on Blood and Plunder, there's just so much like pirate stuff out there in all kinds of media and video games and things. Not so much tabletop games, but it's kind of like the whole Pirates of the Caribbean sort of vibe in general, right? Or best case scenario would be something like Treasure Island, which is a little more down to earth and grounded. But most people are most media stuff tends to go in that Pirates of the Caribbean direction, right? Even if they try to be historical, like Assassin's Creed or whatever, to some degree historical, although not very much at all. But they don't have. I don't think they have. Haven't played that game, but I don't think they have sea monsters or anything. I think they may have a kraken, but I think it's like just a squid. But I don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
But so contrast that to like Port Royal, right? So Port Royal is we are kind of telling sort of the story of something that really happened, but we're a little more loose with the history on this one. This one gives people a little bit more of the Hollywood, but more in the Treasure Island kind of Hollywood vibe, right? So because it's, there was records of privateers looting and raiding, like not raiding so much, but looting the island and stuff. But there's no really record of them like fighting over the goods. There's not records of Carib raiders or Dutch privateers coming in and trying to raid the island in the immediate aftermath. Like news took a little time to spread, so we've made some concessions just to make it a more interesting game. And because we do have Blood and Plunder, and Blood and Plunder ports directly into, you could use any unit of Blood and Plunder will work in Port Royal. So since we have Blood and Plunder, which is very pure on the historical side, we do, even though even in that, obviously we're going to take some liberties. We just don't have that much records and information, so we have to kind of improvise and make do where we can. But it's always done with research in mind. So I think that answers your question, hopefully.
Well, so I was wondering. So we're already creeping into Port Royal. So I suppose some of the things, it's for me. I love my history, but it's the things for me. What I like about games is the space that you can move into about how the people of the time saw the world, as opposed to today. Sea monsters, no. To them, they absolute factually exist. They're definitely out. They 100% believe that they can be A, struck down by a lightning bolt by God, B, eaten by a sea monster, and C, cursed by some Carib shaman. They totally believe those things. So in their context, all of those things are perfectly credible.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
And so I kind of like being able to game in that space. So I know there wasn't in Port Royal, but are we going to see in Blood and Plunder? But are we going to see some kind of Caribbean magic? Are we going to see religious leaders?
Religious leaders is already a thing in the game, yeah. So that's you do have some, especially for the Spanish, who have having more leaning on that. Some of the Native American groups, but not in that sort of sense where we bring the myth to life in that way. There is another game that we are in the process of developing that does kind of lean more in that direction. It's a little bit more of a classic fantasy setting, but almost like but with very much the Blood and Plunder DNA built in.
Right. Sounds like a Sinbad to me. So would I be looking at the right kind of lines?
No, there will be some like Sinbad sort of stuff in there, but it's kind of more like if you just mix kind of just classic fantasy with what Blood and Plunder is now, is better.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah.
But something in the middle, not so like early modern, a little more Renaissance, but with touches of the early modern and a little more of the medievals, because it's it is a fantasy setting, so it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Showing your historian credentials by using a term like early modern, though. I like it. So I've read some good books. I know this phrase. Okay. So Blood and Plunder, you had a big release. I think it was last year, wasn't it? The new 2-player box set.
Yes, came out last year. Last year.
Yeah,
last year.
With the massive box, weighs half a ton because there's 2 ships in there, as well as a whole bunch of guys, and a big plastic release came alongside that. And so I'm assuming with Port Royal, as we're going to go and get some pictures up in a minute. These are the same figures that came out with that release,
right? Yeah. But, so go ahead, sorry.
but it's a much smaller scale. We're right down in the weeds. This is 6 to 10 guys crawling around in some place that's supposed to have some treasure, having a fight over it, in a la Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Or oh dear, we have just lost Mike. Hopefully he's going to come back.
There we go. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Don't know what happened there.
As if by magic. And so right down there is much more the kind of thing that you would read in a novel or in a watching a movie. This is like a small cutting out party from a ship, doing the actual bit where they get the stuff or whatever, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. You can play with as little as 4 models and as many as 15. And the box is going to be the exact opposite of the gigantic big box that you saw. For if you're familiar with like probably the most common, probably everybody's pretty familiar with the classic BattleTech box. So it's a box about that big that you get the game in. But in that box, we've got a 2-foot by 2-foot board with enough terrain to really fill it nice and dense. And it's all punch board ruins and walls and things like that. And you get about 15 total models, 12 of two of the sprues, what is basically a sailor box, what we sell the sailor plastic box, and then some extra models and bits and things in an accessory sprue. And that was the same sprue we did from, it was like our kind of our bonus items from the Kickstarter called the Box of Plunder. So we used that because it's actually just perfect for the game. So
yeah. And so anyone who got that Blood and Plunder set and so forth, they get this and they're ready to go.
Correct. Yeah. So if you've got Blood and Plunder minis, you can just buy the rule book. It's probably a good idea to get the punch board and things. We have a tier in our Kickstarter. I believe it's I forget the name of it. I'll tell you right now. I have this up just in case, then you would forget these things. I always forget all these details. The basic tier, I think. Yes, basic tier. That's the one. So the basic tier gives you the punch board, it gives you the ruins, and it gives you the rule book. But the actual box is still, even if you've got stuff, because when you've built stuff for Blood and Plunder, it'll work. Don't get me wrong, it's the same minis. But Port Royal is much more customizable on the individual minis. And that's why we chose the sprues that we did for this to put in the starter, because you could really customize the way each model's armed significantly, and it matters how you arm them. Unlike Blood and Plunder, where it's kind of like a hand weapon is just a hand weapon, and then there's like pistols and muskets, and it's not as in depth.
Right. So if you got broadsword, cutlass, or axe, it is going to matter in Port Royal.
So you basically have a rapier, a sword, or an axe, right? And then you have other like a knife, daggers, things. So those types of weapons.
Boarding pike.
Yeah. So we have lances and pikes and all kinds of bows and arrows for the natives and the maroons, and so you still get a good variety of weapons, and you'll get grenades and blunderbusses and things like that. And there's also unique weapons. So there's like rare items that you can actually find while you're playing through a campaign that are like odd things like volley guns, duckfoot pistols. You could find Morgan's sword, which will give you like a legendary kind of commander status if you find that.
Right.
So things like that. So
yeah. And that's where where I was talking about like the game's a bit more historical. It's like having Henry Morgan's sword is going to matter, but from an inspiration point of view, it's not actually magic.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but it shows that you're a great sea captain or whatever. Yeah. Okay. We'll just have a quick catch up with the chat before we move on and have a look at some pictures. I'm expecting to have my timbers well and truly shivered. Well, I think this Port Royal is mostly ashore, right? These are cutting out parties.
Yeah. So the game, we technically have rules already done to play it with ships, but we just didn't really have the time to play test it fully, and it really didn't fit the setting that we were launching in. So we decided it's perfect. It's the perfect material to use for an expansion. So the first expansion we have planned for the game it's already pretty much almost fully developed, aside from the campaign differences, and it's basically just playing it moves you up to the if you're familiar with the show Black Sails, for example, or if you've played the Assassin's Creed game, it's basically you play a pirate crew out of Nassau, and you're just starting out, and then you go out and you're trying to raid as much as you can before you were inevitably killed or captured by the Navy. So that's that one's designed to play solo and co-op, but you can play head to head as well. So that one's kind of so the sea rules will be in that's going to be a pretty quick expansion that'll follow. We may even put beta rules up for it just so people can play the sea battles, because the rules are written. So
and it's not just like go play Blood and Plunder. Then there's a different version of a naval combat.
Right. Yeah. It's more scaled down. You can't really play. You could technically play it on any size ship, but it wouldn't. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense. But unless you could just to play on the ship, so you could do that currently. You just had we have our big massive galleon model. You could literally play a whole game of Port Royal just on top of that model. So.
Well, that's true. You could bust one up a little bit. This is a wreck. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with Subs. We do love a Kraken, sir. We do love a Kraken. And of course, we have not yet referenced Muppets Treasure Island. I'm hoping we're going to get to that, Mike, as we, our pirates sounds like fun. I mean, yeah, that I guess that's definitely the thing, right? Isn't it? It's part of the appeal. There's a lot about gaming that I have. That I indulge in my gaming, which just evoke really fond memories of childhood. The things that I really enjoyed doing. Who doesn't want a fully painted set of Hero Quest that they never had a nicely painted one as a kid. They had 2 models they tried to paint and then left the rest or whatever. And I know a lot of guys go back and do that, but the appeal of playing pirates, beautiful. Pirates are fun. So the game, kind of pirate Frostgrave style and size.
Very much so. The board size is a little smaller. You're playing on a 2 foot by 2 foot. Typically, you could play bigger. You could play. Technically, the rules are set up so you could play on a table as big as you want, and you kind of just set a point on the table that the action is going to center around. So if you want to build like a really big table and just for the fun of it, and then that kind of adds some tactical flexibility of where you're going to deploy and set up and stuff. It gives you those options, but all you need is a 2 foot by 2 foot. You could technically play a little. You can play like an 18 by 18. I think is as small as you can take it. But 2 foot by 2 foot board. It's about, I think I said already, 4 to 15 models aside. And in the campaign, it's a little more inspired by Mordheim. I really like the way Mordheim did their campaign system specifically. So there's a lot of that in there. It's not the same, but it's similar. So kind of there were some things that we actually changed that I thought would be better, and then I ended up going back to the way they did it, because in testing I understand now why they did the way they did certain things that I didn't understand before. So, but it's in that vein though. It's basically campaign driven. You could play it one off, of course, and it's got I'd say it's a lot more. So Frostgrave is a game that, although I really admire the design and the whole way it's set up, it's not my type of game. I played it a few times. I didn't really get into it. It's not tactical enough for what I like. So Port Royal's more in that vein. So if you really like kind of in more of a competitive style game, but that has that narrative aspect, this will be something you enjoy.
Interesting. I mean, what I never liked about Frostgrave is you really needed to read and understand the 200 spells before you start playing, because the tactics of the game are the spells you pick. That's true. That's true. That could be maybe why I didn't take from it, because I just kind of picked a few spells that I thought sounded good and just rolled with that. So I didn't read through them all. But I do think that the kind of the modern gamer market we definitely are seeing that the smaller game in terms of space, model count, there's a huge market, and also time. So I'm gonna take a punt here and say this game takes an hour and a half to play.
Less typically, you can if you play quickly, like once you know the rules, it's typically less than an hour. 30 or 45 minutes is probably pretty average. When we play test internally, it's rare a game hits the hour mark, but usually it never really goes less than 30 minutes. We have had a couple 20-minute games where it's typically because my dice will roll only ones and twos. but you know, that happens. You could technically lose the game in turn 2, but it's not common.
Well, that was going to come to one of my questions actually. Subs is saying that this is ticking a lot of boxes. Definitely the sort of older I get, the more time poor I am. Like game low model count, take an hour to play, maybe 2 hours with setup and put down and so forth, but still give me that tactical nuance. You know, a Mantic's Dead Zone, Kill Team, a whole bunch. There's space. I'm working on a World War II game myself that's played on a 3x3 with 54mm miniatures. You know, because cool. I think there's more space for that. I mean, we're all, you know, trapped under a lead mountain, right? Or they got the plastic crack addiction. Call it your particular flavor of miniatures. We all have so much more we want to do than we ever get to. And however poor you are, you still manage to shell out for more than you're ever going to pay. So
somehow, yes.
Somehow, yeah. Much to the chagrin of our wives and children.
Right. Well, that's exactly. This game is designed. So we've had, well, first of all, I really enjoy small-paced or small-scale, just kind of fast-paced games that are just, that'll give you a good, there's a great game called, great game called Relic Blade. And it's a fantasy little skirmish game, and it's really fun. And games like that, I've become. There's another one called Bushido. There's a few that are pretty popular, and they that are just a lot of fun. And I was kind of none of those games was quite the way I would do it. So I said I would love to have Blood and Plunder in this setting. So, and I just think it's so appealing to a lot of people. A lot of people who are maybe interested in board gaming, but maybe afraid to take the plunge because it's kind of the barrier of entry and everything. You know, it's great for something like that.
Yeah. Well, as you've so wargaming adjacent is a really interesting one. What I liked about Oak and Iron, and I have at times waxed lyrical about it, is just how much it has, and Blood and Plunder has got similar things. How much it's like all the best modern games is you're not just recreating something that could have been done in the 80s. It's not a table of weapons and some modifiers and a chart, you know, or 10. You've got cards that you've got mixed initiative, you've got additional abilities, a hand of cards that allow you to get in, you know, have some agency, but without the loss of speed. This is where, like, Warhammer is a total disaster of a game system. It's got all the granularity you could ever possibly imagine, but you spend all your life in the rule book trying to work out how these things interact. And on the other guy's turn, you just sit there for 45 minutes while you get blasted off the table. That you know, whereas the things like cards really bring agency to that. So those mechanics going to similar mechanics that we've seen in Blood and Plunder and Oak and Iron, are they in Port Royal?
Yes. So the whole design concept, is kind of centered around you. This is, instead of playing an entire army like you play in Blood and Plunder, you're playing one of the squads, and kind of how that would go together, right? So, so we don't have the card mechanic because it's not an alternating activation. It's action, I go, you go, but it's broken up with reactions. So anytime you activate a character, I could react with one of my characters. I could see it once during your activation. You're typically going to get 2 actions. You could get 3, but you're going to kind of spend your resources to do so. And sometimes you'll get 1 if your model's fatigued. So a lot of the same concepts that are in Blood and Plunder, they are present. They just play out a little differently. So the mechanics are similar, but not exactly the same. It's a different like turn structure, for example, but the way you resolve actions in combat is mostly the same. The only difference is that the combat resolution is opposed. Instead of like I roll an attack and then you roll save, you kind of do them together, and then you cancel hits out, because I am morally opposed to rolling a single die for attacks. So I need to at least 2 or 3 dice have to be rolling. So we set it up so it's a system where you each roll 3 dice, and every save you roll blocks one of my hits essentially, and then any hits left over, I can try to roll to wound you.
Right.
So there's
it's more dice, it's more fun.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and then it doesn't feel good to roll one die. So, but that's
Especially at Frostgrave, you mentioned that's you roll a d20. It's like that is a very swingy system.
Yes, that's part of what, and I think some of the newer ones use like 2d10, which I like infinitely better. I haven't tried those yet, but I think that might change my whole experience with the game. But which I get the 1d20. It's kind of got that connection to D&D that a lot of people will relate with. It's not. I don't dislike it. It's just not for me necessarily. So
okay. Now you said I go, you go. Do you mean it's like I move a model, you move a model, or
no?
I have my entire squad?
You're gonna move your entire force now. So, but again, that reaction system kind of interrupts that. So you're not ever just going to sit there and just wait for your opponent to finish. When you once you complete an action, so you're typically going to get 2 actions, right? So you can move, shoot, reload, shoot, rally, shoot, whatever, move twice, whatever you want to do, right? But once you've completed an action, again, if any of my models can see you, I can roll. I could take an experience test with that model, and which is typically an easy thing to pass. Plus, you'll have some options to get rerolls and things. So then I can take an action of my own. So there's a lot of back and forth, and that's unlimited on my end. So I can move the same model. I can activate the same model. If you have 10 models and my model can see all your models, I can activate that model 10 times, right? Potentially. Now there's you probably won't. You'll probably miss a few of those reactions, but there's a lot of nuance in setting that up. So you can kind of set yourself up so that you can get those reactions that can actually help you. So you could do it lets you do things like set up ambushes and traps and things where you can it's very chess-like in the back and forth nature and how you're kind of got to think a few moves ahead, think about where you could go and how that can set up. So it's not the typical I go, you go, where it's just you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting for your opponent to finish killing you so you can try to do something. You are active in your opponent's turn. It's very much like I think the first game to really do this is Infinity. So if it's similar to Infinity, it's not as intense. This is the 17th century, so it's not really like a shootout kind of Infinity kind of game. Right. But it's very much in that vein of things.
You don't have to get out a little widget to find out whether you can shoot somebody.
Right, exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. I know people really loved Infinity, those that were into it.
Yeah.
Loved it. So you mentioned, we both mentioned about getting shot off the table on turn 2. So one of the problems with skirmish games, the ones that don't work so well, is exactly that. I mean, if you are unlucky in turn 1, the lucky shots kill 2 of your guys, and you've only got 5. How have you kind of addressed that in this? Because that's you play 5 skirmish games. That happens, and it's not fun to play out the rest of the game. You basically, all right, well, let's just start again. You won that one,
right? So it can technically, it's pretty rare. It can happen, but it's not terribly common. And when it does happen, you're never really totally on the down foot because it could swing the other way just as easily. It does put you in a position where you got to play more carefully. But so we've had it happen where early in the game you do end up in that situation, but you're able to come back from it. It's not just like, well, that's that. So it doesn't have that necessarily. Just by the nature of when you shoot some. So just to give you a mechanic example. So like I said, when you do the opposed test, so if I attack you, so there's also the limitation of reloads on the weapon. So you can't just shoot infinitely, with the exception of bows, but bows are hard to kill people with compared to muskets and pistols and things. But so the way it works is you have to roll for every hit you get through, which typically is rare to get more than 1 hit through at a time. So it kind of tends to be a slow burn on your characters. Now there's no like wounds or anything. Like if you take a wound, you're dead. But instead we use fatigue, so it's kind of like an injury or suppression or whatever. It's kind of just an abstract,
not on his best day.
Idea, right? So so you anytime you get hit, you're going to take fatigue, and that will start to degrade your models over time. So And also because the game is centered around capturing the loot, you can still do that. And because it's designed to be played on a dense table, you start to kind of sneak around more, and your opponent's got to try to corral you in. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but when you hit somebody with an attack, you typically need to roll a 10 if they're fresh. If they have no fatigue on them, you need to roll a 10 on a d10 to kill them, which is doable. A little less with a black powder weapon like a musket. But again, range attacks are much more difficult to land. These are smooth bore weapons, so you gotta be pretty lucky to kill 2 people with musketry early game. But by the same token, that same luck could be reversed. So if you could just kind of isolate. If you try to build like a musket heavy list, it'll be pretty easy for you to like isolate a few of those musketeers and just kind of take them out. So has been the experience so far. And then you'll be able to grab more loot as you're going, because they tend to be. It takes you a lot of actions to fire and reload your weapon and do the whole thing. So, and get to a good firing position in the first place because of the condensed nature of the board.
Okay, and the other big one with campaigns is the snowballing.
Yes.
Like, okay, I won game 1. I went into game 2 with quite a big advantage because your guys were all shook up to hell. Right. And by game 3, I just didn't want to play no more. So again, what's the? I mean, a lot of more modern attempts at skirmishes have got around this by basically you treat each new battle as a new battle with a new army with some legacy units. How are you approaching that with?
So far, that's been the main thing we've really been focused on making sure works. So we have played. One of the goals for the game was to be able to play out a campaign in a day, right? So the games go quickly. So you could spend a day, like an afternoon on a weekend, right? You could just kind of play a full games day. You can play like a 3-game, 4-game campaign. And that was one of the goals. So that goal is also important for playtesting, because we wanted to make sure we got that snowball thing correct, because we definitely have seen that happen. And a lot of games, like you said, they deal with it by taking a lot of the fun stuff away, right? So by simplifying the amount of things you could do and get, etc. So we didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep all that stuff in there. But there are a number of things we've done. So the first and most basic is that you'll see in lots of other games is the underdog bonuses. So we use a point system that we call, or for the campaigns specifically, we use infamy. So your infamy rating is basically your points value for your force. If your infamy rating is 5 higher than your opponent's, so at the start of each turn, you get a pool of what's called fortune points. And people familiar with Blood and Plunder will know fortune points are basically, you get them at the start of the game, you get 3 of them, and you can use them to reroll things or redraw cards. We expanded that a lot for this game because the fortune points kind of replace the hand of cards and the fortune points all in one bid. So at the start of each turn, you get 6, and you can use these to do rerolls of your dice. You can use them to get extra actions on your models, and you can use them to bid on initiative in order to have a better chance of going first. So they're very valuable resources, and they will go a long way. So for every 5-point difference between your force and your opponent's force, you get an extra one of these points. And so you have a 10-point disparity, which is a pretty big disparity. You're going to get 2 extra points, which that could be 2 extra points could be a pretty big difference in the game. Not only that, but we always use the infamy rating to break ties on things. So and to give and they're going to get their choice for scenario deployments, the starting positions for the game, things like that. They're always going to get a little bit of an edge. They're going to get more of a choice compared to the other force, instead of just random rolls at the beginning when you're setting up your scenarios. The lower infamy players typically going to get to, you're still going to roll for things, but the lower infamy player is going to get to choose which side of that they're going to land on, essentially. And then further, we also made it we really focused on trying to find a balance between expanding your force and maintaining your force. So we have at the end of every game, you've got to divide up the plunder, right? And the more experienced your guys are, and the more of them you have, the more you have to pay them. And if you fail to pay them, they will potentially mutiny and kill your commander or get rid of him and replace him with some other guy, which could be pretty debilitating if you've really worked on building up your commander. Not something you can't come back from, but the whole idea was, the whole design concept for the campaigns was to make it so that if you're winning, you are almost at a bit of a disadvantage, so that it's difficult to maintain your lead. So you have to kind of fight to preserve it. You've got to balance your resources well, and make sure that you keep that and basically try to. There's some strategy and some tactics involved in maintaining a lead. It's not just, hey, I blew you out of the water first game, and we're gonna go from there. We did have out of, I can't even tell you how many games, probably over 100 games in a campaign setting. We only really had one instance where a player basically in the first game lost almost their whole warband. they had to start from scratch. So that could technically happen, but it's pretty rare. And the catch-up mechanics, again, are there. So if you do have to do that, it's not the end of the world. You can still jump back into the campaign with new warband and if you have late joiners, same thing. You can have late joiners in your campaign, and the balancing and catch-up mechanics will kind of help move things along.
Right. And what you're describing there is that game we've all had at some point in our lives where you can't roll anything but a 1, right? You just
exactly.
It's just the dice gods hate you today.
Dice just have ones on them. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Well, I like that because it's enabling. The guy who's leading is definitely getting ahead, and you're taking all of these small things which can be quite significant but are difficult to put a points value on, and saying, well, these are some of the ways that we can boost the underdog, right? So in each new mission for the campaign, you are going to take the same guys you had last time, bring them forward. You maybe recruited a couple extras.
Yeah. And typically your recruits are going to be mostly to replace your losses, unless you're very lucky. So you'll end up, we make it's difficult to advance. Now your guys will level up, and it's harder to kill like your officers, characters, or basically your heroes. They're harder to kill, but they get injuries and things, and then you kind of they become, again, it's a balancing act there with them. And then your crew models, they're in groups. So they level up as groups, and then so you'll lose some of those guys typically, but you're not losing their experience necessarily. So as you lose and gain there, they tend to improve. So you will get more weapons, you will get more crew, you will get guys who level up and gain experience, and then those guys will die, and then you'll get new groups and things. So it's
what you just described, it's a bit like sort of Mortal Gods and Test of Honor. You have character models, and then you have little groups of the sort of rank and file guys.
Sort of, but the rank and file guys still operate independently. They're not like in little squads. So they're but you just, as far as campaign tracking, they're in groups. So that's just how you track their experience and such. And they either live or die. They don't really gain injuries or anything like that.
Yeah.
Whereas which is one of the things where an original design idea was that everybody was the same in that regard. But we found that playing later campaign games, it started to become really easy. It was too much stuff to track, and it started to become really easy to forget who had what. So making it so you only got to track up to 4 injuries, you can have up to 4 offense. Technically, you have 5 because your henchmen could level up into officers. So you could potentially have 5 officers, but even that is not too bad. But when you started to get like 7, 8, 9 models, and each guy's got a different injury and leveled up differently, it becomes difficult to remember who was who. So that's one of those things from Mordheim where we kind of went back to what worked, where that's how they did it. And I always thought, like, I kind of want my regular guys to level up more, but I understand now why they did it the way they did, because it just makes it easier to track and keep track and you don't remember things.
The campaign after battle activity should be 20 minutes around the table, right? Not an hour of bean counting and like, I could give these 2 guys a knife, and that would like very rarely make a difference. Yeah. But I guess it depends on the kind of game that people are looking for. But I definitely found, again, sometimes the campaign games, the campaign is more effort, and that's definitely not what I want. So, characterization, our experience of some of the campaigns we've worked on camera. Once you put a name to a guy and you use that name in the game, they develop a character.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you remember that this is the guy that always rolls 1. I don't care what his stat block says. This guy's a chump, and that's probably that, kind of confirmation bias stuff. You're looking for the failures or whatever. So if you're going to have a name generator in this,
that's not something I actually thought of. That's not a bad idea. It's an easy thing to throw in there for the different nationalities and things.
And you probably already printed the books now, though, have you? No,
not yet. So we're still the game has not gone to print yet. We've started to work on the factory with some components. The book is the last one, just because I like to wait to the very last minute to get as much extra testing in as we can. So right now we're still trying to. The one thing I haven't been able to test as much as I'd like is multiplayer games.
Like 3 ways and 4 ways and sustaining balance.
We have rules for it. I just want to make sure they work. So thankfully we've got some playtesters in our group who have been able to test that a bit, and I've got some games scheduled for that. So that should be the book is pretty much going to be wrapping up as the campaign wraps up. So in the next week or 2, that's going to go to the final edit and then go to print sometime mid-July. So we're not terribly behind. And one of the great things about a project like this, the reason we decided to not do a bunch of new sprues and things, is we really wanted to get this game out quickly. And there's, having new sprues would have been cool, but it really wouldn't have added a whole lot to the game. Our sprues are really customizable. You can really change them a lot. Yeah. And so not having to go through that whole process and just being able to use the sprues we already have, and then it's just a matter of working on the print materials, it just makes the whole process so much easier. So we still totally expect to have this game out this year. So this should be in people's hands sometime in the late fall, early winter. So that's the objective.
Very good, very good. Should we have? I'll just quickly check with the chat, and then we'll have a look at some pictures. Guy number 3 was Glamour Smash favorite. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, right? Is once that becomes the guy with the name, I think you get to know the models in your warband. They have a story that grows real life. Absolutely. And campaigns make skirmish games so much more fun. I couldn't agree more. That kind of investment in it, in the characters, in the warband, and the knowing that you need to be able to fight tomorrow changes the way you play. It certainly changes you. You can't fight to the death. You can't fight to the bitter end, because then you lose the campaign.
Unless you're
to get out, like right?
Me. I do it all the time, and I always regret it.
Yeah. We played, and there's a couple of references to it because it's the one that we've spent the most time on. Warlords SPQR, which, by the way, is a terrible game system, but we've had an amazing campaign because we're playing, ancient Romans, and they're all called Bigus Dickus and Erectus Longus and all that kind of stuff.
Of course.
And it just shows you that you can have a fun game experience just by being a campaign.
Oh yeah.
By the virtue of that. And I going forwards, I'd already committed to the fact that if a game has a campaign system, I'm playing the campaign system from day 2. Now, I'm going to play a game to get to know the mechanics of the game,
right?
Because I find all too often with campaign systems, you play a game 4, 6, 8 times, you feel like, oh yeah, I like this game, and I know what I'm doing. Maybe we'll talk about a campaign. By that point, a lot of the guys are like looking at other things now. Once you've played 10 games of anything in a year, you're probably looking for something else, and you just never get to the campaign, or you start it and people start dropping off. Certainly my advice to anyone with if they're even remotely interested in a campaign system, start the second game you play is the start of your campaign. Otherwise you won't get to it and you won't finish it and all those things.
Yeah, good advice.
All right, I am going to just quickly check. So we are looking at these pictures. They're from Dropbox, which means The pictures are all different sizes, so when they come up, I might do a bit of resizing as we work our way through. So, Mike, what do we look at? That looks like a fine government man there. What are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is one of the example war bands. It's in the book there. So this is a Forces of the Crown war band, so, or company as we call them in the game. So you got in the center there, you've got your commander, your captain. Then off to the left with the pistol and sword, you've got your lieutenant. You got a midshipman there with the musket over his shoulder. A sea dog, so one of the Royal Navy sailors there with a pair of pistols. And then you've got a couple of soldiers. There's some other options in that faction as well that aren't represented here, but this is a pretty average kind of this war band. Looking at how this is like a good starting war band right here. This is what you could expect to start with. So you'll see the guy. There's not, you've got a good amount of invested in weapons here. So this faction has a bonus where a lot of your models will start with free equipment because they have issued weapons. So they're going to be a little better armed than most. Or not the most. There's a good amount. There's a couple. I would say almost a little less than half the factions have options like that. Like the English and French privateers or pirates, they get some bonus equipment as well. But this one gets the most.
And by the crown, you mean the English crown?
Correct. Yes. Port Royal in Jamaica is an English colony at this point.
Excellent. And these models come from two different sprues, are they? That one is
three. So this is technically from three, because the commander there, he's part of that accessory sprue that we talked about. And then the midshipman and the sea dog are from the sailor sprue, and then the lieutenant on the left, he's a bit of a mix. So he's got bits from the sailor sprue, and he's mostly from the soldier sprue, and the other two on the right are from the soldier sprue.
Right.
So the kits are pretty interchangeable too, which is helpful.
Nice. Okay, and the one you said it was a midshipman. He's the one with the slot with the rifle over his shoulder.
Yeah.
The musket. Is that, we know as a midshipman? Is that because of the hat or?
Nope. It's just they didn't really have any kind of uniform or anything, so he would just be looking like a seaman, as you see there. So
cool. All right. Next one. These guys look lovely.
Yeah, so this is another one of the example war bands. These are Caribs. So you can see they've got war clubs, which are pretty good at causing some extra fatigue and throwing your models off guard. And they've also got the bows and arrows, or one of the two factions that can take bows and arrows. Which bows and arrows are great because they're oppressive in the fact that they're just going to keep on shooting you and not stop. But
they don't have to reload.
But they're not very powerful, so they don't get any. They don't. So typically, you get bonuses to your damage attack to try to basically kill a model, based on certain things like the amount of fatigue they have, how many hits you got, etc. They never get any bonuses. They just always, you need a straight 10 to kill somebody with an arrow.
Right. That is a big arrow that guy is holding.
They did. Their arrows were sometimes like 5 feet long. But so here we have, this is the Jamaican Pirates starting warband. So these guys do get a little bit of an equipment bonus, you see. So in the center there, you got the captain. And then to the left with the lance, you've got the bosun. And the guy to the far right would be a quartermaster. And then you've got a freebooter in the back with the two guys with muskets are freebooters. And then you've got a sea dog who's in the back with the blunderbuss and the axe.
Very nice.
So this is a maroon war band. So this is escaped slave communities and also leftovers from the Spanish resistance when the English initially took Jamaica. So they're a really fun war band. They're experts at ambushing, and they get a lot of advantages. When you have one of the actions you can take is to conceal yourself. These guys are able to do that. These guys are able to do that kind of as free actions every now and then, and they can be really sneaky. They have like a command rule for the whole turn, where you pay some points and then some of your resources, and they just all immediately vanish. So when you think you've got them, they can kind of escape just when you think you have them, which is very If you ever read the history of the Maroon resistance in Jamaica, it's very fitting for them. And you've got I don't remember which one is which on this one. The only two I really remember are the English and the Pirates, because those are the ones I used in my demo games. But I know you've got your commander is there with the pistol and the club, and then you've got they what's cool about them is they can have a pretty good mix of weapons. They've got a little bit of the native stuff, and they can take all of the good stuff that all the other Europeans could take, as they've stolen all their stuff.
Right. And are these made from the? I'm just wondering, is this the same sprue as we had with the Carib?
Yes, it's the same ones, and you get the different head options, so you could run them as Africans or as Native Americans, and the militia sprue also has African heads, so you could do like a bit of a mix of European clothing and the loincloth and all that. So there's some variety that you can do with those. Yeah,
these guys are pretty muscular, aren't they? Looking at the models,
yeah,
they're quite a different body shape to the sailors.
Yeah, well, they're running around in the Blue Mountains in Jamaica, so good to fit. So this warband is, I believe this one is meant to be another English pirates warband. Yeah. This one's a little bit of a smaller start. This one you start with a 5 instead of 6, but as you can see, everyone's pretty well equipped. You've got a guy in the center there. He's got an axe. He's got a blunderbuss. He's got a few grenades. You got your captain there with a pistol and sword. So they're a little bit more. Now, another option, I think the way we built this one, another option is you can actually spend your points early on to buy experience for your model. So you could actually start them in a game with experience and potentially improving their stats from the jump. Yeah. So I believe that's what has been done here.
Right.
I remember right. Anyway. So here we have a Spanish warband. So this is made up of our resin models. So these are not. So if you have an existing Blood and Plunder collection and you're playing Spanish, this is an example of a warband you could take with your existing model. So these all come in all these models come in the Spanish army box. So you got your captain in the middle there. And you've got a couple of corsairs with the muskets, and you've got some the lanceros that are there are taking the place of marineros, who are like they're sailors, as well as another one with a pistol there. So some of the more different weapon options there with a couple lances and pistols and muskets and things.
And they've got much more of a 17th century look, haven't they? With the buff coats.
They do, yes, and that would have been, and that wouldn't have been terribly uncommon for the Spanish in this period, as they were typically pretty behind. They didn't get as much stuff as they liked from the mainland, especially if they're lower class.
Yeah, and presumably the Caribbean rather than South American colonies.
Yeah. These guys could typically have come from anywhere, but yeah. So here's another similar one made up of our resin models, and this is the Dutch. So this is a more the Dutch, like they're a good brawly faction. They get bonuses. They get bonuses. So Dutch sailors were known. They would duel with knives. That was like a thing. They were like expert knife fighters. So
recreationally they would duel with knives.
You could call it recreationally. It's probably accurate. It's like more to settle disputes, but
it's not how we see the Dutch today.
Yeah. So, so they have they lose a lot of the penalties you get for using a knife or a dagger instead of a sword or an axe or something like that.
Right.
So it's one of their faction advantages. So as you can see, they've got a couple guys there with knives and muskets and things. Here we have same thing. So resin models, but built for our French models. So we have the infamous Boucanier there on the right of the captain. We've got a filibuster, a couple Morons, and as you can see, these guys are pretty well armed. The filibuster model on the left, he's got a pair of pistols, he's got a knife, he's got his musket. The guy in the middle's got a pistol, a sword, and an axe, which you get some bonuses for when you can kind of mix the advantages of both weapons if you kind of do two different melee weapons.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The commander's got a brace of pistols. The Bucanier's got a knife and a musket.
And a magnificent outfit.
Absolutely magnificent, yes. So they got this faction gets a few bonus weapons off the jump as their personal weapons, so that you're going to be able to, if you like, if you want to play shooty, this is the faction to go with.
Right. To go French. I couldn't bring myself to do it, sir, but it's good to know that option is out there.
Yeah, so here we just got some game scenes. So this is a demo table built for us by Dexter Hyde of the Plunder Den channel. So you definitely check him out. He makes pretty incredible terrain and does some cool battle reports and stuff, and some tutorials and things. So this is the demo board he made. Then we just set up some scenes on there and took some pictures to give people kind of the impression of the game. And that's a good, this is, you could see the density of the terrain. There's a lot of places to hide and move around. And
yes, and this is the thing about being on a 2 foot by 2 foot board. Right. And if I may say so, I mean, this looks very Mordheim meets Pirates, right? Everything's a bit dilapidated. That's part of the inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, well, Port Royal was completely destroyed by an earthquake and tsunami that completely devastated the island. So it's ruined. It's a mess, and this is just the battles in the aftermath.
Right, and you're playing in that particular moment in time.
Correct. Yes.
Right. I see.
That's why everything looks the way it does. Yeah.
Okay.
So here we go. Just another. I love our photographer does a really good job with these fake night shots. That's just a light that he set up there to make it look like a moon, but it looks pretty cool.
Yeah. So we got some more scenes. I whizzed through these a bit. Because I guess from these photos, are the rest of the photos there scenes?
Should be, yeah.
Showcasing the models. So where can somebody come and play test the game on this beautiful demo board then, Mike?
Well, the next place will be at Gen Con. So we'll be at Gen Con, and after that we'll be at Hurricane in Orlando. So we'll have this all out there so people can check it out and play it, see it. We may have a box. We may have a copy of the box already by Gen Con. That's the hope. So we'll see if we have it there.
Oh right. Okay. That's soon.
Yeah, that's soon. So we've got the only missing component would be the book, but we'll probably have just like because the book will be done, but it'll be probably still being printed, and so we'll probably just have a local print copy to show. So, but we should have a complete box. It may not arrive because sometimes when they fly it from China, it takes a few weeks to arrive, but. It may not arrive in time, but it'll be close. So I think we might be able to have it there. That's the hope.
Okie dokie. What I'll do then is I will go on and we'll have a look at the Kickstarter website so we can talk, because there's obviously Kickstarters, they come with extras. There's a lot. There'll be a launch box and there'll be some extra things depending on what people do. When will people who don't Kickstart be able to get hold of this? Is that
hopefully in December of this year? That's the plan. We'd like to have it in we're going to be able to fulfill it really quickly. So one of the advantages of fulfilling it ourselves is that we're good at it. So we've done it before. And we should be able to do this. We should be able to get this out totally in a couple weeks once it gets to our warehouse. So once it's out to backers, it'll go right to regular release about a week or two later.
The retail version,
right? The retail. It'll be the same at this point. So that is the current plan. So hopefully we get it early enough that we can have it out before Christmas but if not, it'll be just after. Worst case scenario, sometime in like January. So pretty soon for people who don't get on the Kickstarter, but you still have your chance to get on the Kickstarter. So if you've got a Blood and Plunder collection already, especially if you're overseas and worried about VAT cost and whatnot, there is the book version, which is the basic tier, which I mentioned. Is if you're in the UK, I don't think there's any that ships as a book, so there shouldn't be any VAT on that. and then the rest of them are. I'm sorry, the digital version, of course. If you just want the PDFs and whatnot, that's obviously you're going to get that with no VAT or shipping. So,
yeah,
so
we'll talk about shipping as we go through the Kickstarter. But yeah, I mean, we know you're just off the back of the really successful Blood and Plunder Kickstarter, and those were big boxes, and you seem to get that all out on time. So you obviously know what you're doing in that respect. So here's the Kickstarter page for anyone that's interested. Port Royal. Here we go. So, you've not actually got a. Is there a goal? I mean, is this fully funded? This is going to happen, right, Mike?
Oh yeah. Our goal, all we needed to fund was $15K. So
okay,
or 15,000 US. What is that? About 11,000 or so, 12,000 pounds.
Yeah,
more or less. Yeah. So right now in dollars, we're at let me refresh here. Got my phone so I can
90,000 just under.
Yeah. So in US, that's 113,322 and just under 90,000 pounds. So we're doing very well. We're very appreciative of all the support. We've had the great thing is the number of backers.
Yeah.
I think I'm hoping to exceed 1,000 backers by the time the project is done, which to me would be the best thing. It's just getting people the game. That's we make games so people can play them.
So looking at this and create your company. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Yep. Just check that. So create your company. Some of the factions in there: Pirates, Buccaneers, Spanish Corsairs, Dutch Capers, Maroons, Carib Raiders, or Forces of the Crown, which is the correct choice, by the way, people, if you're not paying attention. Can you cross recruit?
So you can't cross recruit, but the only sort of exception to that is there's an exploration phase after each game that is optional because it's hazardous. So you're typically going to get something good, but you can also get something bad. You can get like attacked by wild animals or ambushed by a much larger group, things of that nature. So, but you can find various characters you can add to your warband that are just kind of roaming around. So you can get like old veteran buccaneers, which would technically be part of the Jamaican Pirates faction. You could find like surgeons and priests and things of that nature, important officials, all kinds of people like that you just encounter wandering around the ruins. So that is the only kind of cross play that exists at the moment.
Right. But you think down the line in expansion, I might be able to get, like a Carib guide or something like that?
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And we talked about the first expansion already, but we plan on doing several expansions in different kind of locations and settings and specific stuff. The game actually originally started out as kind of more of a French and Indian War kind of thing.
Oh, really?
With like fur traders and stuff like that. So that's obviously something we'll move to. We've talked about the Scottish Darien adventure in South America, and a few other things.
You mean the one where everyone died?
Correct. That makes
twice.
Those are the types of things that make for good campaigns. So
right. But why did they all die? Because it's horrible over here. That's why.
So there's definitely going to be a few expansions that cover different settings and different things where you'll have more. One will include new options and things as we go, of course. So.
Okay, so going back to this, the game, the aftermath. So you have campaign sheets. So are these like faction cards for your warband?
Yeah. So since each faction's got a couple special rules that is attached to them, we made the actual roster sheets faction based. So you've got all your stuff is on there. It kind of has a little bit of all the quick reference for their factions and all that. All the important stuff is there. So we're trying to minimize. Another goal of this game was to make it light on looking stuff up and on components, so that you don't need a ton of stuff to get playing and you don't need to be going back to the book constantly. So you don't need a bunch of cards for your stats. Everything's just on your roster sheet.
Yeah.
Roster sheet, quick reference. And we also have the deck of cards, which lets you do all the scenario setup and the random tables with cards instead of having to roll.
Oh, is it procedurally generated missions? You get a map
sort
deck
of
and a mission card and a random event card or something.
Yeah, so what you'll
like
get
Oak
is
and Iron.
a little bit, yeah. So what you'll get is you'll get one for deployment and you'll get one for special rules for the mission, because the mission's there's always going to be 5 plunder tokens on the table that you got to capture, and then the nature of those will change with this or the there's just various things that'll change with the special rules cards, and then the deployments will also add a lot of variety to how that's done. So how you'll start the game, where you'll deploy, how things will go down will vary a lot. So it's a little bit of it's a very basic mission generator, but it does its job. So every game's a little different.
Cool. Adventure on the tabletop, so you build your warband. Yep. How does it play? So we're going to see some of the these are some of the components, right?
Right.
What's in the box? Nice skull and crossbones box. D10s. You've not gone for proprietary dice this time, Al. No, your dice. You'll have dice with pictures on.
Yeah, Oak and Iron's the only game we have that has the proprietary dice. So.
Oh, really? It's just the one that I play.
It's just that one, yeah.
All right. Okay.
The rest of our games use D10s, just regular numbered D10s. Yeah.
Okay. And then so you got 15 unpainted models. So that's 2 of the sailor sprues that we got with the old Blood and Plunder, presumably. Well, I say old, it was only last year. And then this other sprue, which was a Kickstarter. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, those are some of the bonuses. And then those are the 3 characters you get in there. And then below, you'll see some of the bits. So these are, just because of the way that we had modeled those, you don't get quite. So I think you get 1 barrel and 1 chest, but just to give you an idea of what's there.
Yeah,
that's not an exact representation, but it's close.
Okay. Now card tokens. How good are these card tokens? Because any tokens you need to play a game with. I don't know if you'd seen Adeptus Titanicus. It came with like laminated card type. Basically, photographic paper was the token. I was like, this is disgusting.
Yeah,
as a game token.
So if you're familiar with Oak and Iron, it's going to basically be like that. So
yeah,
so
it's like a laminated grey board,
right?
With a polished finish. Great,
yeah.
Great. Measuring tokens. So you've got numbers on this little widget here. You don't.
Yes. You don't need a measuring tape to play. So everything is, if you're familiar, so just the same way Oak and Iron is a completely self-contained game in a box, this is the same. The exception here is that you will need to glue your models together and cut them out of the sprue. So it's a little bit of extra effort to get started, but it's this is completely self-contained game in a box. So you don't need to add rulers, measuring tapes, anything. You would just play right out of the box and be good to go.
Right out of the box, you're good to go. And then this punchboard terrain. Is this made of the same grey board?
Correct. Yeah.
So this is pretty durable.
Yeah. So we're getting and we have there's different material options as well. So we may find. So we are getting So when I said stuff's already kind of in production, this is the main thing that I'm focusing on for the beginning. So this is already in production, right? As far as they're making the dies and stuff to cut it all out. So within the next week or 2, we were hoping to have it before the project, but unfortunately we had to already do some tweaks and go back and forth. So it didn't quite get done as fast as we liked, but it's almost done now. And so that stuff I expect to have it soon, so we could inspect it and look at it, put it through its paces, make sure it's the durability that we want. It is thicker. We looked at a lot of other people who do similar things. There's a lot of punchboard terrain by like Green Stuff World, and there's another brand I forgot. They have they use little plastic clips to connect it all. And we looked at Infinity and a few other ones, and they we're using a little bit of a thicker board than all those. So I think it should be more durable, and it's got like a nice UV coated finish, and we're told it's the best of this option. So we'll see when we get it, but we have some other options to work with, so we can have them cut different ones, and we're going to go from there. So we're going to make sure it's the most durable option.
Right, and that's coming in the box. And after launch, are we going to be able to see this kind of stuff in resin on your store, or
probably not? Just by the nature of we have part of the Kickstarter project, we do have STL files, so people who have printers or know people who have printers will be able to print out some plastic 3D printed versions of the terrain. But we don't really have the resources or the tools to really make these ruins and things in resin. Our model ship production for Blood and Plunder kind of eats up all of our resin time. We had some terrain line before, but it was just it was hard to manage at the same time as our ships are very popular, thankfully. Yeah.
Issues.
Yeah, and then those buildings also came out a little thin, and some they were easily warped, so we just kind of stopped doing them. But people did like them, but and they could be fixed easily. But it's just by the nature of it, we're probably just going to avoid that. So we have the STL files that people can use to print, which is a popular thing these days, and then the punch board. And plus, you could always hobby and make your own. The Plunder Den YouTube channel I know has already been working. When he built that board for us, he recorded the whole process and did a bunch of tutorials based on what he did.
Right.
So, still old-fashioned thing. But if you're new to gaming and you don't have terrain, or you're worried about having appropriate terrain, you've got it in the box and it works. It works well. We have some of the other ones. We bought some ruins of different types, and they work great. They're kind of convenient in a lot of ways. You don't have to paint it, which is nice. So you just put it together and throw it on the table.
Which again, and right down to the terrain. I often say this with if you a good starter set contains the two things that are often missing in many company starter sets. One is a playmat, and the other is just even the tiniest bit of terrain, because that just transports you to the setting. I think a really important component for establishing the uniqueness of a game and its setting and its place. And I feel with the starter set, not including a playmat, it's just so unfriendly to new gamers.
Yeah,
I know totally anybody in the industry. Clearly, I'm not going to use that paper playmat. I've got a lovely board to play on. But when I was 14, this would have been my first game. Just give me a paper playmat, for goodness sake.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. As you can see, we always do. Blood and Plunder had the same. Oaken Iron has the same. This has the same.
Yeah.
So we have a neoprene version of it as well, and this is just a mock-up. This is not the actual one. It's going to be a little more muddy looking, kind of like the board, more like the board in the other photos.
As the project's developed, it's got darker, has it? Is that what you're telling me?
Basically,
yes. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. And then you've got some stretch goals and so forth, and people can opt in and get extra bits. So stretch goals.
So you can see some of the STL terrain there and stuff as well.
Right. Wild beast attack. Is that during the game, or is that they're just cosmetic?
Yes, they can actually attack you during the game. You put a model on the table and it'll start harassing you and such.
Right. Okay, and more coming soon. And then with this, then we've got down the bottom. These are your existing plastics, which are pretty modular models. Because I've had those from Blood and Plunder. All right, and then on the actual thing, then, so. As Subs has pointed out, often with these things, if you're getting more than the book, anything that's kickstarted in the US for a UK EU thing is going to end up being expensive compared to buying, which was why I was asking about retail versions.
Right, I figured that was why, and it's a necessary evil for us at this point. We've just had such a bad time in our previous projects getting stuff to the UK in an affordable way, and in a way that we've just had nothing but problems, unfortunately, in the past. And everything we fulfilled from our end we've had no issues. We know, I mean, because it's the problem, and I don't want to bash the companies who do these things, but the reality is that the people, for the most part, they just don't care about your project. You're just another widget coming through, and they've got 10, 20 projects they're doing at once, and they make mistakes and they're not paying attention, and they they'll delay your stuff to put a bigger. We're not a huge company. We're not going to be a big priority for them. You know, we're not.
What did you say? You're talking about 1,000 units. So what are that? Maybe 200 in the UK out of that 1,000?
A few hundred exactly. Yeah. So we've just had not just us directly, but you know, our customers is like the last project we did. I'm not gonna put the company on blast here, but you know, they had tons of customer service issues, and their customer service was like 2 weeks delayed. So if you send them an email, you wouldn't even hear from them for 2 weeks, and then people would email us, and then they would tell us the same thing.
Yeah,
and it's just a frustrating.
And that all comes back to you, right? You have no control over it. You do actually care about your customers, and there isn't a damn thing you can do about it. I get it, and it's always
stressful. Yeah, it's super stressful and frustrating, and I just want to fly over there and get into a fist fight with people, and that's just not helpful for anybody. So and so we decided. I mean, we did this with a previous project, our Blood and Crowns Kickstarter. We fulfilled it completely in house. We did the whole thing in less than 10 days. Everybody got their stuff. We did the international shipping. In the UK, we do charge. We do have in the UK and in Canada, we do have the option to put all the fees and everything up front, and it does give a little bit of a discount since we bulk it. So it's I wouldn't call it UK friendly, but it's more accessible if you're in the UK or Canada. Just because of that. So you won't have to pay anything up front. It's just going to come right to your door, and you know, like anything else. So that's all handled on the back end. But we have been looking for better options, but we just really haven't found anything that we feel comfortable with yet. And so we're going to do it in a way that we know is going to work, and we know that the retail's on the other side of this too. So you know, we work with War Cradle, who distributes over there. We have some game stores like Gaming Figures, and a few others. So it's going to be available after the fact as well. And typically in the past, you know, you may have to wait a little bit longer to get it instead of backing it. But in the past, like for example, we finished the Blood and Plunder Kickstarter that we just did with the plastics. We had it all delivered to U.S. customers by the end of December of 2022. Our fulfillment company did not finish shipping until like, man, I want to say like August 2023, more or less.
Yeah.
So
that's not good.
You're better off. I mean, you're better off just waiting for retail. But you know, and if you've got a collection already, like we said, you've got the book option, you've got the PDF option. You know, it'll tide you over in the meantime. And Blood and Plunder product is readily available in the UK right now. So.
Most of the big companies, like, you know, your Goblin Games and your Element and Firestorm, and that they'll stock Blood and Plunder. The problem is always that, like, you know, if they haven't got an item in stock, you might have to wait quite a while before they can get another one. Right. But when you get bigger, they'll get more accessible, right?
Right. Yeah.
As the company grows.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. All right. We won't go down to everything out, but Laser Pirate Print, you're going to be able to buy extra card terrain. So there's two questions there, isn't there? One is presumably you can buy you can always buy extra components in the Kickstarter, yeah? Is there going to be like a pledge manager as part of that?
Yeah, so post campaign, you'll be able to, and during the campaign now we have add-ons. One of which is an extra set of card terrain. So that is you could buy as much of it as you want. Although one set is enough to fill a table, 2 sets you could really go crazy, which is cool. So I definitely wouldn't discourage you from getting 2. But you can
start building different buildings, can't you? The first set you build it the way the instructions tell you. The second set you experiment with, knowing you still got a playable game back there.
Right,
exactly. Stuff like that. And will it be available after the Kickstarter though? Will you be selling these in in a Ziploc bag or something? And you get a couple of sheets of this terrain.
Yeah, everything in the project right now will be available in retail.
Magic.
Or is already in some cases.
Yeah. Okay. I think those were most of the things. Pledge manager, and then there's a lot of videos of demos and so forth. Picture of you in fine hats.
Yeah,
no, that's not you.
Ago. That is me.
That is you.
I don't know why they chose that picture. I didn't pick that picture.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It is
a young you.
That was when we first started That was right after our first Kickstarter, so you could tell the difference. You could see what a lot of these working with some of these fulfillment companies has done to my beard. So
yes, yes. Right. And then the pledge manager stuff itself. So for UK purchase, well, no, we're looking at here. It's $39 is the digital, which is going to get you everything in PDF and the game mats and STLs of the terrain. So, and because there's nothing proprietary here in terms of dice, that's all going to work, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
You could just play with the measuring tape, no problem. The little tools in the box just make it easier. And you get that in the basic. So the basic pledge is the card terrain, all the rulers and tokens and things, and your rule book.
Yeah, magic. And then for a little bit more,
that's just the box right there. Yeah. Plus the digital
launch
stuff.
box. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then if you want to go mental and spend real money, you get physical and STL. You get an extra sprue. You get the neoprene mat. What's the spray deck then? What's that?
So that's the deck I was talking about before. So that's got it's actually a number of different little mini decks all in one. So one, it's got, if you're playing, so the game does have solo and co-op rules. So it does have the deck to run the AI. You don't need this. You could use regular playing cards, but this just spells it out right on the card for you, so you don't have to use the chart in the book.
Right. So you use a deck of cards, and then you've got a table tells you what that means.
Correct. So the cards have the table printed on it, so you don't have to reference.
Right.
And then you've also got the terrain set up. You've got the event cards, and you've got things like that.
Yeah.
So it's just a bunch of different resources to just avoid flipping through the rule book, essentially.
Right. Okay. And then this is just getting more figures.
Correct. Yeah. This gives you one of each of our plastic boxes, as well as everything in the previous tier.
And this is the retailers.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Or the person who wants 10 boxes for some reason.
The person who wants 10 boxes. When you're very open to people wanting 10 boxes, I assume, Mike.
Yes, I would be. I'm certainly open to that.
Okay. And Mike, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to just sort of wrap up in the last few minutes, if I may. You have already referenced expansions. I think I've had my fingers burnt with Kickstarters. Probably everybody has. And one of the ways you get your fingers burnt with Kickstarters is that the game is dead on launch, because every possible idea they had, they've built into 3 expansions. You get the box of stuff the size of a washing machine turns up at your house, and nobody wants to play it. There's issues with the rules because it's not going to be addressed in expansions because they've already exhausted the appetite for the game before it's even been released, because it's released 2 years after I pledged all that money. You're not operating that model here. You said you're already working on expansions. They're going to be released separately. This is fully available retail very shortly afterwards, which is really reassuring. So tell us about some of the thinking around those expansions. Are we going to be seeing the thunder of cannon? Are we going to be seeing masts fall and all that?
You will. So the very first expansion will focus on sea battles. Again, particularly in Nassau in the Bahamas, you're playing a pirate crew out of the infamous Providence Islands, or New Providence. And so again, if you're familiar with the show Black Sails, that's basically the setting. And the idea is you have a small crew, you're running out with a canoe or a longboat, or if you're lucky, a small bark or something. And and you're going from there, and you're going out to start raiding and capturing sloops and merchant ships, and there's going to be an AI that drives it, or you can play with a game master or play head to head. However, you can play a pirate war kind of thing where you're just all playing against each other. But narrative wise, it's kind of more you're just attacking fat merchant ships essentially, right? So, and then the idea is you're going to roll on a table to determine what sort of encounter you're going to have. So you spot a sail. So if you've played Sid Meier's Pirates, which is a pretty popular video game,
you've got to be old to have played that game, Mike.
Well, they had a newer version in 2002 or something.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. but even if not, if you're older and you play the original, same. It's kind of running on that sort of system, where you're going out, you sail, and then you find there's no map or anything. It's just you kind of go out. You're saying, okay, I'm going to play a game. So you roll and see what kind of ship you encounter, and so then you could end up. That's going to determine, like, you make some choices, and that's going to determine how you end up engaged, right? So you can kind of play it cautious, but there's a good chance the ship gets away, and eventually, if you do that too much, your crew will mutiny and kick you out, and that's the end of your campaign. Or if you get too aggressive, you can end up right on top of a Navy ship, and now it's a good chance you're just going to be decimated, and you just got to try to get away if you can. And that's kind of the idea. The idea is to just kind of play and try to see how successful you could be before you're eventually either mutinied or captured and killed, which is the story of pretty much every pirate ever. So that's kind of the idea, is to kind of go through that storyline and retell that.
So this, what you just described, though, there is a genuine game expansion, right? There's a new setting and a new way to play.
Correct.
Which is, it's another mission generator. But you mentioned solo play. You mentioned there's an AI deck. I mean, have you got a video out there of someone using that system? I mean, a lot of games will tell you that there is a solo version of it. The reality is they're often pants, aren't they?
So we don't, but it is based on the one that we have for Blood and Plunder, which has been pretty well received. And I do believe there are. I think Dexter Hyde, if I remember properly, has some videos using. I don't know if he's using it explicitly, but it's been pretty well received, and you could go and read it for yourself and see what it looks. It's on our website. If you go to the download section under Blood and Plunder, there's a solitaire rules.
Oh, and right. That's there,
right,
and that's very similar to what you're going to get in this expansion that you're working on.
It's essentially identical. It just alters some things, and obviously it kind of fills in. It adds a little bit with the reactions and whatnot, but it's based around that, because that worked really well, and people were happy with it. It's a pretty robust AI. It does have some surprises and some things that can kind of catch you off guard. So it does give you a little bit of a challenge to play against.
All right, so that's expansion 2, which you said you're already working on. So in expansion 3, am I going to get voodoo and lizard men and all the good stuff?
So that's technically a separate game, but that is a thing coming. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Cool. That is a thing. And as a fan, is there anything else that you're working on? Because you seem to be running a lot of sort of product lines at the moment. What's the future for Oak and Iron? My favorite game that you've made.
Yeah. So I've kind of hinted at it a few places I told you before we started, but so Oak and Iron, we are running out of the original run, and for a while I have been working on some tweaks to the rules just to streamline it a bit. There's a second
I won't
edition.
Pick the same initiative cards every game anymore. I'll have to reread them and make new choices.
The initiative cards will be mostly the same. Some of them slight tweaks, but for the most part, the most changes are in the rules. But we're releasing a new box with the second edition. It's essentially the same box. It'll have some new stuff in it, but mostly, and we'll make the second edition rules available for free, just like we've always done with every update. So you don't have to run out and go. If you already have Oak and Iron, you don't have to go run out and buy a new box. But if you are thinking about getting into Oak and Iron, that is something that is coming. So we have currently the biggest. If you're familiar with Oak and Iron, as I know you are, there's 2 big changes to the rules. One of which is kind of seamanship actions and crew actions just kind of get integrated into one group. So
can you still do them both though?
So you get 2 actions now instead of 1.
Right.
So that's how that works.
So because some of them you reload and some of you're now kind of smoothing that out, and you get 2 of this type of action.
Yeah, so I've done like a million Oak and Iron demos at this point, and that's always kind of one of the places where things kind of get jammed up for people. Yes, that it's a little bit too many steps in the process. So now it's kind of just you move your ship and you can take 2 actions. Some of the actions are specific as to when you can take them. So, for example, if you want to speed up before you move with the seamanship, what would have been a seamanship action before, if you've already moved, then you can't take that action because it's impossible. So stuff like that. But for the most part, that has gone a long way. And everybody that I've demoed it to some people, and that seems to clear up that little bit of confusion. It's probably one of the more complex bits of the game. Once you know it, it's easy. It's just knowing the process.
I think it's difficult for your first 3 games.
Yeah.
Is the reality of it. But I approve of the change.
Right. Yeah. Good. I'm glad. And then the other one is that close combat. So your boarding actions are moved into a separate phase. So it's a final phase after shooting, and it's simultaneous. Because some of the initiative swings on especially certain faction builds like the Dutch and stuff, they could be a little overpowering, and it can kind of be a sort of thing where if they get you and they have initiative, you're in trouble. So there was some swinginess there with that kind of thing. So so we moved it to its own phase. It's simultaneous now, so you're gonna both kind of give it at the same time, and that's that.
Right, nice. As Mirror Series reminded me of one of the other questions I wanted to ask earlier, is when you do some more figures, because you are in that kind of pirate, not quite pirate fantasy, but certainly hitting that zeitgeist. Are we going to get a sprue of lady pirates?
A whole sprue? I'm not sure, but we currently have we have a pack. We have a current blister pack in the resin minis called the Boucaniere, who were like the wives of the Boucanier, and they're kind of like French made kind of looking models, but they have muskets. We do have a sprue for a female character in part of the Kickstarter, and that's customizable, so you can do a few ladies with that. So between that sprue and that pack, you do have a few options.
Yeah, because unlike in armies, there are a handful of stories there. There are some, women pirates out there. It'd be good to see. But you've got some on. So is that on the which sprue was that on? Was that on the extra sprue?
So yeah, so we have some resin sprues that we're offering in this Kickstarter with Port Oil, and one of them. So there's different ones for different factions, and one of them is just a female, like a female pirate essentially kind of character. We also do have two. We have Anne Bonny and Mary Read in our legendary pirate sprue, or our sprue kit for that one. So we have 2 other lady pirates there as well.
Cool. And the other one, because I remember I had the same conversation with the guy from Dead Man's Hand, Stuart, about that, is one of the things about plastic, because of the desire for the modularity of the plastic sprues, is pretty much everyone has the same body shape. You never get a fat guy on a plastic sprue or the short guy, I said, I'm like 5'4" on a good day with my shoes on. So, can we get a little bit more variety of body shape?
So we've done some stuff like that. We've got some usually in our resin kits, unfortunately, not in our plastic.
Yeah, no, you often get them in the monopause stuff.
Right. Yeah. I think it's just the nature of the material. Only so many bodies to work with. And then you're kind of adding heads and arms and bits. It kind of adds that one body stands out a little more in those cases. But it's good feedback. I'll definitely keep that in mind next time we do a sprue set.
Okay, no, but that's just for me. If there's, I think like a lot of people, I mean, the premium product is the plastic. It's the modularity, the ease of construction. But you do once you got a few of them, and these are all pretty much exactly the same height and all of those kind of things. And often resin models alongside plastic ones, they look different.
Yeah, these won't. Ours are pretty consistent across. Yeah. You can look at pictures in there, like there's a mix in all the pictures you saw there of our resin and our plastics, and you won't, once they're put together and painted, you can't really tell them apart if you don't know which one's which.
All right.
So thankfully it's
magic. Thank you for all your time. Oh, sorry. If there's anything else in the pipeline that you're propelling to let us know today. We talked about Orcanine. We talked about Blood and Plunder. We talked about Port Royal.
Yeah. So this year, so there's a couple of things in the works. So one is so the next project for us on a Kickstarter will be War Stories Pacific. So War Stories is our World War II historical RPG. So which we were very surprised to discover when we decided to develop this game, that there is no role-playing game for a historical Second World War. There's lots of like Cthulhu stuff and things of that nature and zombies and whatnot, but nothing historical. So we went ahead and made that game a couple of years ago. And so we're going to do a Kickstarter now, probably around September, October. Not set in stone yet, but somewhere around then, for a big expansion for the Pacific, because right now it's kind of focused on Europe. You could play like Americans or Brits, paratroopers and stuff, or tankers and different things like that. But so it'll be a big Pacific expansion. So that's the next big project. We've got a few other things in the works. So we've got if you play Okinawa, you might be familiar with the Timber and Sail blog. So the guy who runs that, Jason Klotz, he's currently working on a set of Wild West rules for us, based on it's a little bit between Blood and Plunder and Port Royal. We've got that. We've got Rufus and Kai, who have done our.
There's a lot of interest in those games at the moment. I know, like Wiley Games have been doing really well with their Fistful of Lead. Dead Man's Hand have had some fantastic new stuff come out recently with their plastic range. You know, there's obviously a real appetite for cowboys at the moment, which I think everybody thought was a long dead genre.
Yeah. It's so this is we're gonna throw our hat in the ring on that one.
Right.
That one's still, I have not had a chance to really look at it in depth yet, so we'll see where it ends up. But it's something we're gonna do. It's he's been an excellent contributor, and he's got really good ideas. So I know that it's gonna come out really good, and we're gonna work with him on it. Another one is Blood and Bayonets, which is our Blood and Plunder port over to Napoleonics. So it's a Napoleonic, army skirmish game like Blood and Plunder is. But
so, like,
to my knowledge,
50 figures would be a big game.
Correct. Yeah. 50 figures. It plays a little bigger than Blood and Plunder, so I think 50 figures would probably be more in the average size. But it's it's individual men, so it's not like formations, or formations are in the game and such, but they're you could break them up, you can go in different things.
So it's got a Sean Bean Sharp feel to it.
Yes, definitely, and also it'll have a bit of a Master and Commander feel to it, because we will be including the same ship rules we use for Blood and Plunder. There's no reason not to have that in there. So
right, so there'll be a naval kind of theme to it, more. So
so you can play just like Blood and Plunder, totally amphibious. You can play land, sea, or in between. So
cutting up Hornblower then.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Oh, I love it.
So that's pretty far along. I'm not sure that's.
Will there be plastic figures for this?
No, so this is a rule book project, so similar to what we do with our other games, where it's just there's plenty of figures for Napoleonics right now. Yeah, I'm not trying to get into that one.
But, okay, cool. There are not plastic Royal Navy cutting out parties. I can promise you that, because if they did, my house would be full of them.
That is true, but I think that might change. So I have some insider knowledge, but
man,
not from us, but it will. I think that's something you'll see.
Yeah.
But so we've got that, which is pretty exciting. The big thing we're working on internally immediately after Port Royal wraps up completely, which has had a lot of development work done. It's actually pretty far along, but there's other stuff. Is basically, it's called Blood and Sorcery, which is going to be our first foray into the fantasy settings, right? So it's basically Blood and Plunder,
but with lizard men.
Mechanically, but with lizard men and elves and orcs and everything else. And it will also maintain the naval rules. So you can play your cutting out actions, and you can play small naval engagements with your fantasy figures.
With elves and goblins.
Exactly, yeah. And it's a kind of and so it's going to be, we're working, that one is looking like, we were originally going to do this as a rulebook project, but it's looking more and more like that's going to be a full-fledged big project with miniatures and everything, as we've been developing the lore for it and things. So We've just kind of gotten excited about it, and we've got the ability to probably pull it off. So nothing's set in stone yet, but that's looking like the direction. But I think that's going to be really cool, and that's something that, to my knowledge, has never really been done before. So you know, and it'll be
a skirmish game.
Yeah. So
I mean, you've got Man of War, but that was like your Oak and Iron equivalent, wasn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is more. It's, you know, if you know what Blood and Plunder looks like, just it's basically that. So so it'll be a big or a big army kind of skirmish, right? So this will be more like along the size of Blood and Plunder. So 50 figures would be a large force. But you know, Blood and Plunder, just like Blood and Plunder, it scales up and down really well. You can play with 15 models, you can play with 100 models, and it works. And so it's I'm really excited about it. We've had a lot of fun working on it, and it's our first foray outside of historicals.
And presumably that is going to be will need to be relatively model agnostic, because you can't possibly produce a range of figures to support that.
It will be
in the way that you can create stat sheets for dwarves, but
it will be model agnostic, but we will have some unique factions and things that we'll design miniatures for. Excuse me, but there's a lot of but you will be able to play with your own models. So if you have, you know, I think it would be crazy of us to not try to bring in people who already have collections. You know, so that's the plan. That's the plan, is to make it so that you can come in with our models, you can use your own models, you can do just like we've done with our historical ranges, you know, because lots of people play Blood and Plunder with other figures, which is the worst way to play it, but it's acceptable. So, but so it'll be just like that. So.
And this is called Blood and Sorcery.
Blood and Sorcery, yeah.
Blood and Sorcery. So if you want to bring some magic into that. Now, I wanted to go back and just mention this Napoleonic thing. I've been looking for a decent Napoleonic skirmish game for a while. So if you got one that's based on what was it called? Blood and what?
Blood and Bayonets.
Oh, but it's not out yet.
Not yet. No, that'll probably be out probably in the first quarter of next year. I'd say it's pretty far along in development. I don't have anything to do with it, thankfully. So it's able to actually progress. Well,
you sound like you did a lot, Mike.
What's that?
Sounds like you're doing a lot of projects.
Yeah, we do have a lot. Thankfully, for most of these things, I kind of just play test once in a while, and then you know, work with editors and factories and whatnot. So it's still a lot, but it's not too much. So I can still work on at least one other game project on the side as we go forward. So right now, once Port Royal has been the one. So once Port Royal's done, the plan is that shifts gears back into that. So,
right. No, I'm very interested in that. I mean, if you're looking for some play testers, you know, send us over a PDF.
You got it. We will.
Be very interested in that. All right. So, that was Mike from Firelock Games. The Blood and Port Royal. You don't got the word blood in it. It's not got the word blood in it.
I know. Just so I get it. It doesn't have an ampersand either. It's the first game with no ampersand. Well, War Story.
And so Port Royal is on Kickstarter at the moment. Well, for those of you that are really nervous about the kind of shipping and satisfaction times, you're expecting international release retail version December, January.
Yeah.
More
or less. Yeah.
More or less. All right. Mike, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for watching. As you popped into the channel, if you want to get a fighting fantasy hit to reminisce from your childhood, Mirror Manga reads on Sunday afternoons UK time. They play the old fighting fantasy books digitally on her live stream. And in the true tradition of playing fighting fantasy books as a kid, you are actually allowed to cheat. Which I was really impressed with. You're allowed to bookmark the pages and refight the fights, which is fantastic. But she is a good laugh, and you do get to vote on all the choices, so you can make her do all of the horribly bad things to do. And hopefully don't die in the course of the adventure. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. We are at not Warlord. We are going to be at Warlord Day in September. For anyone that wants to come along and say hi, we're going to be there. Hoping to learn a lot about the Bolt Action 3 release. But I'm actually up at Battlefront HQ next week with Wooly Mike. Hopefully you get to interview Mr. John Stallard while he's in the UK, find out what's going on with them. So you should be able to hear some news from us on that soon. And other than that, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.